Hello and welcome to my third lesson on the structure of chords. And in today's lesson we're going to deal with diminished, diminished seventh, minor seventh, flattened fifth, that's all one chord, major 9, minor 9. So we've really moved on a pace from our good old major and minor, which we probably felt very comfortable with. It's going to get a bit more complicated today, but hopefully I can demystify it all for you so that you won't be scared about understanding and using these chords. Let's look at the straightforward diminished chord. So C diminished has got two minor third intervals. C to E flat, like you found in the C minor chord, and then E flat to G flat, that's another minor third. So there's one minor third, there's another minor third. So play those three notes, C, E flat and G flat. That is C diminished. So from your C major chord, your E has dropped down a semitone to E flat, and your G, or perfect fifth, has dropped down a semitone to G flat. So there's C major and there is C diminished. So the only note that's common to both those chords is the C. So diminished, think of narrowing. So there's your C major chord and you're kind of closing it up. You're bringing those two notes down so the whole thing is kind of squashing together, and that's what I mean by diminish. I mean, if something diminishes, it gets smaller, doesn't it? You see? And that's exactly what we're doing here. Now, if I add one more minor third on top of that, so if I do C, E flat and G flat, and if I do A on top of that, so I've got 1, 2, 3 minor third intervals, that is a diminished seventh. Now, I used to think years ago that that was the diminished chord, but it's not. It's a diminished seventh chord, and there is a difference. So there's our diminished chord, our C diminished. C, E flat, G flat. Here's our diminished seventh chord, which is the first minor third diminished fifth, which we dealt with in our diminished chord, and the new thing we add is the diminished seventh. Now this is quite weird and quite interesting. Right, what's the seventh in the scale of C major? It's B, isn't it? Okay. Now, to do a diminished seventh, I've got to double flatten that note. Now, if you don't know what double flats are, it's taking it down two semitones. So it's actually takes it down to A. So B double flattened becomes A. You see? So if I just flatten that B, it becomes a minor seventh. That's not what we want. We want A, and so we want to diminish that seventh, and to do that we need to take it down two semitones. So that's quite weird. Don't worry if you don't understand that. All you've got to remember is that C diminished seventh, C dim 7 is your normal diminished chord. So C, E flat, G flat and an A on top. Just keep going up in minor thirds. So C to E flat, E flat to G flat to A, and you could keep going, see? So there is your diminished seventh chord. So C major seventh is C, E, G and B. We did that in a previous video. And C diminished seventh is C, E flat, G flat and A. So it's, you see the movement there. It's a very distinctive sound, isn't it, that diminished seventh, as is the diminished chord. Wow, getting quite complicated now, isn't it? Let's look at those notes. So C, E flat, G flat and A. Now we're getting into the realms of very advanced stuff here, so please don't panic about this. It doesn't matter if you don't understand it, as long as you know what to do when somebody says, oh, I want a diminished seventh chord here. Just get your major chord, take the third and the fifth down a semitone, and then if you like, add the sixth of the scale, the A, if that helps you to remember it. So it's first, minor, third, so you get those two notes in the minor chord. The diminished fifth, one semitone down from the fifth and the sixth. Whatever gets you through, you know, it doesn't matter how you get there as long as you play the right chord. Let's look at our next chord, which is got a right old mouthful of a name. It's a minor seventh flattened fifth. Some people call this a half diminished seventh or just half diminished. Wow. So this is the same as the other two diminished chords as far as the first three notes go. So we've still got our C, E flat and G flat. But this time the top note is the minor seventh note, the B flat, you might remember. So it's quite an interesting chord, and you might resolve that to the diminished seventh. So minor seventh, flattened 5. So if you think about it, there's your minor seventh chord. You might remember that from the first lesson. C, E flat, G, that's your minor chord, and the minor seventh note, the B flat. Now if I just flatten or diminish that G to G flat, minor seventh, flattened 5. The minor seventh chord with a fifth flattened. Half diminished because we haven't diminished the B. We've only half diminished it. You see, we've only gone from B to B flat, not B to A. I know it sounds very complicated. I can feel myself as I'm saying it how complicated this is sounding. But it's a nice chord, the half diminished or minor 7 flattened 5 chord. So it's definitely worth learning. It's not some weird jazz thing you'll never use. So C minor 7th, C, E flat, G, B flat. Just take your G down to G flat. Here it is on the software. So we've got C, E flat, G flat and B flat. So even though we're in the key of C major, we've got 3 black notes in that chord, 3 flattened notes in that chord. Okay, now we're going to move on to ninth chords. These aren't as complicated as the diminished chords. So if you see C9, right, what you've actually got there is a C dominant ninth chord, and basically all it is a normal C seventh chord, C, E, G and B flat with D on top of it. Now D is the ninth, which is also the same as the second. If you take your major scale up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then D would be the 9, you see, an octave on the second. So simply put, C9 is C7, C dominant 7th, with that D added. So it's kind of a jazzy, funky C7 can be used instead of a 7th, especially if you're playing jazz or funk. So that is C9 or C dominant ninth, because it's the dominant 7th chord with that added ninth. So dominant ninth chord, first, major third, perfect fifth, minor 7th and ninth. Also known as the dominant ninth chord. So we've got C, E, G, B flat and D. And I'm sure that's in a famous pop song. I can't think what it is. I think it's might be a James Brown thing, but it's there we have a ninth chord, C9 or C dominant ninth. A major 9 is pretty easy to understand. It's a major 7th chord with that added 9. So C major 7th, C, E, G, B. So all white notes, and they're all on the lines of the stave. Here they are. C, E, G, B and D. First, major third, perfect fifth, major 7th, that's your major 7th chord, and just the 9 on top. So there's your major 7th chord, and there's the D on top. So there's the 9, and there's the major 9. Ninth, major ninth, minor ninth. This is the minor 7th chord with the 9th on top. So minor 7th, C, E flat, G and B flat, and then add that 9th on top. So very much a minor chord. It's actually a minor 7th with the 9th on top. So the notes are C, E flat, G, so that's your minor chord, then B flat, that's your minor 7th chord, and the D on top. Obviously, you know, if you know anything about jazz music, you'll know that there are probably hundreds of chords, and I've dealt with, well, probably more than I'd planned to. I think it's been interesting to go through all the diminished chords and all the 9th chords, but there are things like 11ths and 13ths where we span more than one octave, I mean, I've done that bit, I've gone up to the ninth, but obviously you can go higher. But I'm not going to do that here because I think we've probably done enough. There's probably more than enough in these few videos. Once you've learnt all these chords that I've dealt with in these 3 videos, you might be interested in delving into the 11ths and the 13ths and stuff like that. So there we are. Hope you found that interesting. A lot to digest there, I know. If you did find it useful, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much for watching, and you'll see me in my next video.